You know what your teachers didn't tell you? Every empire you were taught to admire lost battles they were not supposed to lose. To people they were not supposed to fear. Napoleon's biggest army, Italy's modern rifles, the Mongol fleet, the British line at Isandlwana, the Ottoman siege of Vienna. None of them won the day they expected to win. Over the next 12 minutes, you will see 8 times an empire was broken by people it considered nothing. A slave revolt that doubled the size of America. An African emperor who broke a European army in a single afternoon. A Vietnamese general who buried 400 ships in a single tide. A Polish king who led the largest cavalry charge in human history. 6,000 women who fought a French invasion to the last soldier. None of these stories made it into your textbook. There is a reason for that. Stay with me to the end. The pattern at the end is what your history book did not want you to see. The biggest military victory in human history was won by people Europe didn't consider human. In 1791, the enslaved Africans of Haiti rose up against France, not for better treatment, for freedom. Napoleon sent the largest expeditionary force France had ever assembled, 50,000 soldiers. The Haitians sent them home in coffins. Yellow fever helped. The Haitian army did the rest. By 1804, Haiti was the first Black republic in history. The only nation ever born from a successful slave revolt. Napoleon was so broken by the loss he sold Louisiana to the United States for pennies. The U.S. doubled in size that year because enslaved people in the Caribbean refused to lose. Your country exists the way it does because Haiti won. Haiti broke Napoleon and doubled the size of America. The next country broke a European army in a single afternoon. Italy thought Africa was easy to colonize. Ethiopia disagreed. In 1896, Italy invaded Ethiopia. Modern rifles, artillery, 20,000 soldiers. The plan was simple. Add one more country to the European map. Ethiopia answered with 100,000 men under Emperor Menelik II. At a place called Adwa, they met the Italian army. By the end of one day, Italy had lost more soldiers than any European power in any colonial battle in history. 7,000 dead, 3,000 captured. The European officers who survived walked back to the coast in shame. Ethiopia did not just win a battle. Ethiopia broke the rule. While every other African nation was being carved up by Europe, Ethiopia stayed sovereign. The only African country that was never colonized. Because in 1896, they reminded the world that maps are written by whoever is left standing. Ethiopia broke an army on a battlefield. The next country broke a fleet on a river. The Mongols had conquered everything. Vietnam buried them in a single tide. The Mongols conquered China. They conquered Persia. They conquered half of Russia, the largest land empire in human history. 3 times they invaded Vietnam. 3 times Vietnam destroyed them. The third invasion in 1287 sent a Mongol fleet up the Ba Dang River. General Tran Hung Dao was waiting. He had ordered iron-tipped wooden stakes driven into the riverbed at low tide, hidden under the water at high tide. The Mongol fleet sailed in at high tide. The tide went out. 400 Mongol ships were impaled and trapped. The Vietnamese burned them where they stood. The greatest empire in history was buried in a river by a country a fraction of its size. The Mongols never came back. Vietnam beat the Mongols with engineering. The next country beat Europe with knowledge, while Europe was burning books. Africa had 25,000 students studying astronomy. In 1500, the most prestigious university in the world was not in Oxford. It was not in Paris. It was in Timbuktu, the Sankore Madrasa in the Songhai Empire of West Africa. 25,000 students, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, law, while Europe was burning women as witches and forbidding common people to read the Bible. Timbuktu had public libraries with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Scholars came from Cairo and Cordoba to study there. A book in Timbuktu cost more than a horse. Knowledge was the currency. Then in 1591, a Moroccan army with European cannons destroyed the Songhai military. The library survived underground. Families hid manuscripts in the desert for 400 years. The history Europe wrote said Africa had no civilization. The manuscripts were always there. Africa held the world's library. Europe held the keys to its own destruction. By 1683, the Ottomans were at the gates of Vienna. 18,000 Polish horses stood between them and Paris. In September 1683, the Ottoman Empire was at the gates of Vienna. 150,000 soldiers, the largest army the Ottomans had ever sent into Europe. If Vienna fell, the road to Paris was open. Inside the city, 11,000 defenders were starving. Then, over the hills came the Polish king, Jan Sobieski, with 18,000 winged hussars, the most feared cavalry in Europe. Wooden frames with eagle feathers strapped to their backs. The wind through the feathers made a screaming sound at full gallop. Ottoman horses had never heard it. They panicked. Sobieski led the largest cavalry charge in human history straight down the slope of the Kahlenberg. The Ottoman army broke in 3 hours. Vienna was saved. Europe was saved. Every textbook in your country teaches you Napoleon and the Battle of Britain. None of them teach you that Poland once saved the entire continent. Poland saved Europe with a cavalry charge. The next country invented modern warfare. The British Empire arrived in New Zealand expecting an easy colonial war. The Maori taught Europe how to dig. The trench warfare that defined World War I was not invented in France in 1914. It was invented in New Zealand in 1845 by the Maori. The British Empire arrived in New Zealand expecting an easy colonial war. 18,000 soldiers, modern artillery, naval support. The Maori had a fraction of that. What they had was an engineering mind no European had seen. They built fortifications called pa. Earth walls absorbed cannonballs without breaking. Hidden firing trenches let warriors disappear after every shot. Bunkers protected from artillery overhead. Anti-grenade pits caught explosives before they hurt anyone. The British attacked these positions and lost over and over. For 27 years, British officers wrote detailed reports about the Maori system and sent them back to London. The reports sat in military archives until 1914, when European generals dug into the same earth in France and called it their idea. The Maori invented modern warfare. Europe stole it and forgot to mention them. The Maori taught Europe to dig. The Zulu reminded Europe what spears could do. 1,300 British soldiers with the most advanced rifles in the world. None of them walked off the field. On the morning of January 22, 1879, the British Empire was at the height of its power. The sun never set on it. The Maxim gun was years away, but the Martini Henry rifle was the most advanced infantry weapon in the world. At a place called Isandlwana, in South Africa, 1,300 British soldiers waited with rifles and artillery. 20,000 Zulu warriors came over the hills. Spears, cowhide shields, short stabbing weapons called iklewa. The Zulu commander Nchingwayo used a tactic called the horns of the buffalo. 2 flanking columns wrapped around the British position. The center pinned them in place. By afternoon, 1,300 British soldiers were dead. The largest defeat the British Empire ever suffered against an indigenous army. Spears beat rifles. The British Empire never said it out loud, but every officer in London read the report and changed how they fought every war that came after. The Zulu broke the British line at Isandlwana. The last army on this list broke a French invasion. For 200 years, the Kingdom of Dahomey fielded an all-female army. 6,000 soldiers Europe refused to believe in. Trained from childhood, the most disciplined infantry in West Africa. Their name in their own language was Mino, our mothers. European travelers in the 1800s came home with stories nobody believed. Then, in 1890, France invaded Dahomey. The French army had modern rifles, machine guns, and artillery. The Mino had muskets, machetes, and training the French had never seen. French officers wrote in their letters that nothing in Europe had prepared them for what they faced. Hand-to-hand combat at point-blank range. Women cutting through bayonet lines that broke European armies. The French won the war eventually, with overwhelming numbers and superior technology. But the Mino fought to the last woman. French commanders called them the most formidable soldiers they had ever met. Then France went home and made sure the world never heard their names. You just watched 8 empires lose battles they were not supposed to lose. Haiti, Ethiopia, Vietnam, Songhai, Poland, the Maori, the Zulu, the women of Dahomey. 8 times an empire was broken by people it considered nothing. 8 times the official story called it luck or anomaly or unfortunate. There is a pattern. The pattern is not luck. The pattern is who writes the history book. The empires that lost these battles wrote the textbooks you read in school, and they did not write themselves losing. Every story you just watched is documented. Every battle is on the maps. Every general's name is in their own letters and their enemies' letters. None of it is hidden. It is just not assigned. Tell me where to dig next, because remember, history is written by the winners.